years old. Yeah.
Amazing, which is where we get the name for sideburns.
That's right.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Did you know about that about your great-great ancestor? Yeah, sideburns come from your great-great ancestor.
Is that true?
Yes, that is good.
Oh, wow.
It's awesome.
Who's interviewing you
All right.
here?
We can switch off. So how does it feel to be descended from the dude who invented sideburns? Especially when you didn't even know about it. Yeah, but you don't have sideburns now, I can see that. But do you have plans to grow sideburns in the future? Maybe. Can I get a yes or no? I don't want anything on the fence here. Can I, on the record, yes or no?
Yes.
I take that as a yes. Excellent.
All right. Of course, then you'll have bird-sized sideburns.
That's true.
Which
Were we not recording any of that? That's
all of that was recorded.
okay, good.
The light is on. All right, Connell, in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Okay, my name is Connell Burnside, and I'm interviewing Adam Gidwitz about his books, A Tale Dark and Grimm and In a Glass Garden. Okay, what inspired you to get the good ideas about doing fairy tales that have already existed, and then doing stuff rather than doing like regular Cinderella, where like that happens, and then make it different?
Yeah, good question. So, the reason I did it is I was a teacher, and I was teaching 2nd grade, 5th grade, a little bit of high school, and I got a phone call from my school asking if I'd be willing to be a substitute librarian for a day, and I said yes, because librarian is like the coolest job I can imagine, because you get to like hang out with kids all day and read them stories, which is my favorite thing in the world. So I was like, yes, I want to do that. So they said, you're going to be reading to 2nd graders, and I said, perfect, no problem, right? And they said, you can read any story that you want. And I thought, great. So I went home and I was looking around on my shelf for a good story to read to the kids. And I come across my big book of Grimm's fairy tales. And I was like, fairy tales? Those are perfect for little kids. So I take them off the shelf and I open up the book and I open up to a story called Faithful Johannes. And as you know, but as many people do not know, in the story Faithful Johannes, 2 little kids get their heads cut off by their parents, right? So I was like, can I read this to 2nd graders? Will I get fired? And then I thought, let's find out. So I went into school, brought in the book, started reading it to these 2nd graders. And as I started reading it, I started to see them getting a little bit nervous. And so whenever they started to get really nervous, I would make a joke and help them calm down a little bit. Or if something really disgusting and bloody was going to happen, I would warn them. And at the end of the story, I finish the story, and I look up, and every kid has the same expression on his face. Every kid looks exactly like this. And I was like, oh boy. So I dismissed the class. Some of the children are crying. I think one little boy might have peed himself, I'm not sure. But a few of them come up to me afterwards, and they were like, that was good. And I was like, what? And they were like, you should turn that into a book. And I was like, maybe I should. But back to your question, I didn't know how to make it a book because it already is a book, right? Like these fairy tales already exist. So I was like, what can I do to make it my own story? And after a couple of weeks, I had the idea. Why didn't I just take all the things I said to those kids, all the jokes I made, all the warnings I gave them, and put them right into the book, which is what I did. And so in addition to weaving these stories together, I'm just telling you the story. That's how it came about. Nice question.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
What inspired you to choose the characters Jack and Jill and Hansel and Gretel?
Great question. So Hansel and Gretel obviously came first, and they were not the original characters. The original characters were Ava and Wolfgang, which are not very good names for these characters. I don't think that anyone would have bought a book about Ava and Wolfgang. The reason that I chose Hansel and Gretel is because as I was writing the book, I was realizing that a lot of the themes of the book, the feelings of the book, were about parents who were letting their children down, right? Betraying them, undermining them, not sticking up for them the way they should. And I realized that the story that best embodies terrible parents is Hansel and Gretel, right? Because in Hansel and Gretel, 2 parents run out of money, and their solution to that is abandoning their children in the forest so that they can starve to death. Terrible, right? So I was like, so of course these kids, who have all these terrible parents, they are obviously Hansel and Gretel. And then, for the second book, I just needed 2 other kids. And I knew I wanted to tell some stories about Jack, because I wanted Jack and the Beanstalk in there, and I wanted Jack the Giant Killer, which is another English fairy tale. So I knew I wanted Jack, and I was like, well, who should Jack go with? Obviously, Jill. So then I put in the whole falling down a hill and Jack breaking his head open and stuff. So that's how I came up with those 2. Good question.
Thanks. This one was for my mom. Do you think fairy tales can scare children into behaving?
That's a really good question. So they used to use fairy tales for that to some extent, and there's a whole book of, they're not really fairy tales, but sort of moral stories called Strudel Peter, or like Shock-Headed Peter, Crazy-Haired Peter. And it's all about children having horrible things happen to them because they do not behave. I do not think that that's what fairy tales are for or about. I mean, yeah, they can scare kids into doing whatever you want to, but I don't think that's what fairy tales are for. And I don't even think that fairy tales scare kids that much. There are freaky parts, terrifying, bloody parts. But the important thing about a fairy tale is that it starts with once upon a time, and it ends with happily ever after. And kids know that. And so when you're telling a fairy tale, they know what world you're in. More importantly, or as importantly, the language is very simple, right? Like if you're reading like a horror book, like a Stephen King book, he'll really describe all the terrifying things that happen. But a fairy tale usually tells them in a very matter-of-fact kind of way. Like, and then she cut off her finger and put it in the door, and the door opened. So what? Like, that just happened. So what? So fairy tales, I think, actually don't scare children that badly. At least they scare them in the moment, but by the end they know everything is going to be okay. That's how I feel about fairy tales.
Not all.
There are some that just are meant to give you nightmares for the rest of your life. Yeah, that's true. Well, that's interesting that you bring that up. Very interesting. Yeah. The Hans Christian Andersen stories are not, I would say, aren't really fairy tales. And I use some of them in this book, and it's one of the reasons why the second book feels a little different than the first. Because those stories are invented by an author, right? Hans Christian Andersen wrote those. Whereas the fairy tales were told for many, many generations, and then written down, and to change to some extent, by the brothers Grimm. But a story that is told by an author, constructed by an author, like the Hans Christian Andersen stories, is going to feel actually pretty different from a fairy tale. And I think you're right. His are like devastating, right? Little Match Girl is, it just ruin your life. You know, it's so sad. So I think those are actually kind of different from fairy tales. Yes, sir.
Which book did you enjoy writing more? The first or the second?
Enjoy writing more?
Yeah.
The first one. Because the first one was kind of like a gift. It just came to me. I had found these amazing stories. No one knew about them. No one was telling these kind of stories, and I just did it. And at the end I was like, woo! That was cool. The second one was much harder for me. I wanted to talk about difficult issues about kids and, you know, how you relate to your peers and how you figure out who you are. And so I had to struggle with this one a lot more. And I'm really proud of where it ended up. I think it'll be really meaningful to a lot of kids, as well as like funny and gross and all the rest of it. But it was much harder to write than the first one. These are some great questions, man. All right, I got a question for you. How does it feel to be descended from the famous Colonel Burnsides who invented sideburns?
It feels good.
Excellent answer.
Even though I know nothing about them.
And will you wear sideburns when you grow up?
Yes.
Good answer. Well, we should sign off. This is Connell Burnside. I'm Adam Gidwitz.